Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay, every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Art Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
Hey, this is Tyler Jones, and you're listening to the Element Podcast. Hey guys, we're fixing to get to the podcast, but first I wanted to tell you about a giveaway we're doing. KC, give us the quick details.
All right, guys, we are giving away two premium OnX memberships. And if you're a public land hunter or a private land guy who's looking for access to new places and landowner names, there really is not a better tool out there for you to use. But Tyler and I use these things, our premium membership, everywhere we go in the country pretty much. We're going to use it for trout fishing in Bozeman. We're going to use it for hunting deer in the Midwest. We're going to use it for hunting deer right here at home in Texas all the time. It's great for marking your waypoints and keeping up where camera locations are and all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. And there's just some pretty sweet layers. If you're talking about going out of state to go hunt, like a state that might be a CWD state, you can now look at the QDMA layer and see what's on there. So these are pretty valuable for us, all right? And we're giving away two of them, and here's how you can win them. You go to iTunes, scroll all the way down to the bottom of the Element Podcast page, okay? And you'll see a spot where you can click 5 stars. Go all the way to the right and click the 5th star, and then write a little description. Maybe like, I really like Tyler's Mohawk, even though like maybe it's countercultural. Or you can write something like, Casey's new orange public land boots are awesome, and give us 5 stars. And yeah, as of then, you will be entered into the drawing for one of those 2 OnX premium memberships.
Yeah. And what if they win both of them? Is there a chance of that?
I guess if they leave 2 reviews, they might win both of them. So do that. That's fine. That's perfectly permissible. And give one to one of your buddies.
There you go.
Be a good hunting buddy.
All right, so let's get to the podcast. All right, so on the phone, I have Dr. Karl Miller. He is a distinguished professor of deer management at the University of Georgia. That's a tongue twister. How you doing, Dr. Miller?
I'm doing fine. How are you guys doing?
Oh, we're doing good. It's pretty warm. Are you staying cool where you're at?
No, we're in Georgia in July. It's never cool in Georgia in July.
Yep, I know it. We're living here in Texas, and it was 110 when we got back from the QDMA convention yesterday. It was 102 today. We had a cold front last night, so we're doing better.
Well, we haven't approached that, that close.
Yeah, it's definitely warm for sure here, but a little less humid than it was there in New Orleans.
Yeah, my wife's from Texas, and she keeps, saying she wants to go back to Texas. But when I hear 102 and 106, no, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, what part of Texas is she from?
She's from around the Denton area.
Okay, yeah,
cool.
That's cool. We're here just probably about 70, 80 miles east of Denton, kind of. So out on Interstate 30, so not too far away.
And I've got a son up at Shepherd Air Force Base up in Wichita Falls too.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
Yep, not far at all, man. So y'all are pretty. You kind of know what we're talking about sometimes, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so I know the highlight of the QDMA convention was definitely you running into Casey and myself. But after that, did you enjoy the rest of the event?
It made my day.
How'd the rest of the event go for you?
It was actually a very good convention. I was really, really pleased. They had, wide diversity of talks, from very technical, scientific talks, all the way down to, some how-to hunting talks, and a lot about deer management and a lot about the future of the whitetail. It all worked out. It was a good convention.
Sure, yeah, I thought so too. I mean, there was definitely a lot of things that, that was KC and myself. That was our first time to go to the convention, and so everything was so new to us. And we knew of guys like you and Dr. Craig Harper and guys that are just experts in this, and we definitely didn't want to miss those. And glad that we didn't, and we're able to learn things. But man, it was a lot to take in, a lot of new people to meet, and came away with a really good taste in my mouth about the whole thing. I always try to kind of validate any kind of organization like that may be a conservation organization type, and just make sure that I believe in it before I really start getting super involved. Definitely had a good taste in my mouth afterwards.
Yeah, supposedly they're going to be holding this thing in Athens, here in Athens, Georgia, next year. So if that is the case, hope to see you over our way.
Oh yeah, I'm sure we will, and that's what we heard too. And there seems like there's going to be a really good opportunity to kind of, I guess there's more research facilities and things that we might be able to tour and kind of talk about there. Is that kind of the thing that goes on there at Georgia?
Right. We have a pretty good sized research facility about 4 or 5 miles outside of Athens.
Okay, cool. So one of my favorite parts was the panel of you and Cuz and Joe Hamilton and Matt all up there kind of telling the old stories. I really like to kind of reminisce about how things used to be sometimes. So we grew up here on Lake Fork in Texas, which is a huge bass fishing lake, and like all the old guide stories are always intriguing to me. But anyway, you gave us kind of a spill on the future of deer hunting. Towards the end, some of the things that we need to look out for, actions that may need to be taken going forward, and it was actually probably my favorite few minutes of the whole convention. So, is there a way you can kind of reiterate some of that for our listeners?
Ooh, boy, I'm going to try to do this without painting a picture of doom and gloom, but there are some major concerns, major issues to deal with out there right now.
Yeah.
What I said at the time when the panel that you're referring to is, I took us back into the history that, one time the whitetail faced a lot of issues as well. At one time we didn't have whitetails in most of the country. And, the people who stepped forward to provide that leadership to get the whitetail restored, it was a massive effort. They were up against a lot of things. But it got done. And then we got to the phase where we had, deer got reestablished, and the deer actually did too well, and we ended up having way too many deer. And we were seeing out-of-balance sex ratios and overpopulations of deer and so forth. And again, we had to have that rallying cry from a few professionals, such as Joe Hamilton, who started the QDMA, and other researchers, Al Brothers in Texas, and a number of other people that started the rallying cry of, hey, we need to manage these deer appropriately within balance of their habitat, and to achieve the types of natural sex ratios and age structures that they should have. Mm-hmm. Well, we were very successful in what the QDMA has done, and then the education part of it, of educating hunters all across this country, has been tremendous. But here I think we're facing a kind of another phase of the issues. The white-tailed deer has been extremely successful, but right now the whitetail it has some issues facing it in many parts of the country. We've seen the predator, the coyote, expand from its historic range in the Midwest and through, from Texas up through the Midwest to all across North America now. And in some areas, we're seeing some pretty significant declines in recruitment. And, that can be offset with some declines in doe harvest, but you're going to get to a point where, if you're not harvesting enough, if the hunters aren't satisfied with the ability to harvest deer, we're going to start losing hunters as well. Mm-hmm. So we're facing that. We're facing, growing bear populations all up and down the Appalachian chain and other places where bears still occur. But I think the biggest issue we're facing right now, and I think everybody would agree with it, is some of the disease issues with the whitetail, and some of which that we can deal with things like EHD. But the biggest one, and one that scares me the most, is chronic wasting disease, because I think we're still sitting on the tip of the iceberg. We've seen it spread to 23 to 25 states right now. That currently have it in at least some part of the state, and that's going to continue to spread. And we're seeing the prevalence of it spread where it does occur now, and the extent of it. It's moving across this country. Thankfully, other than one reporting in Mississippi in the southeast, we're pretty much free of it. But time will tell. We've seen how fast it's moved from one state to another.
Sure. Yeah, it's
so we've got a lot of work to cut out for us in the future. And organizations like the QDMA or any other conservation organization, hunters are going to need to become involved, become involved with their voice, become involved with their money, because this is not going to be a simple solution. Up to this point, the white-tailed deer has been successful because it has a biology that allowed it to be successful. It's very high reproductive rates. But right now, and so at that time, we only had social issues to deal with. Hunters, our bag limits and so forth. But now we not only have social issues, we got biological issues to deal with.
There's a lot there. We had, we're pretty recent CWD state here in Texas, and it's amazing that it's recent, actually, in my opinion, because of how many deer have moved around the state and from other states into ours.
Certainly.
But I guess the first thing I would say in response to that is, who is the guy or the organization, like being in the world of academia, I feel like you might have a handle on this, that will lead us into the battle against CWD and help us find a way out of this thing?
I don't think there is a guy, and it's going to take a lot of money, because this is a disease issue that, these prion diseases are a very, very difficult issue to deal with. We've been raising deer here in our facility in Georgia and actually bottle raising them and transporting them out to Colorado State for the last almost 15 years to provide them some known disease-free deer, because Georgia is disease-free. And and they have to end up going into a biosecure laboratory and so forth. So the cost of doing research with something like CWD is incredible. Mm-hmm. So it's got to be done through there's got to be some political capital expended here. And organizations like the Quality Deer Management Association, the Mule Deer Society, and so forth, all these organizations, and they have recently formed they've come together and formed what is called the National Deer Alliance. Mm-hmm. You may have heard about that.
Yes, sir.
But that's kind of to get a footprint, get the hunter's voice and a footprint into some of these issues that go beyond individual species like whitetails. So we got mule deer and elk and so forth associated with that as well. Mm-hmm. Boone and Crockett Association, Boone and Crockett Club is associated with it as well. So this thing is just, kind of relatively new. It's in its infancy, only a few years in existence, but it's already started to have some of that political influence, and we need to have a lot of hunters voice their opinions and push that influence as well, because frankly, we're going to have to loosen up a lot of state and federal dollars to tackle this one.
Yeah, for sure. I know the NDA is working on that, I think, with the TRCP right now, and we've had Nick Penizzato on the podcast, actually, I think twice.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so, we've definitely discussed, I think the last discussion we had with Nick on the podcast was actually pretty much all CWD talk. So it's definitely, we're trying to do our part and make sure to spread the word and hopefully educate some hunters that may not know about it, that can voice for the cause, I guess. So
yeah, certainly. And deer hunters have been pretty complacent. They've had it too easy for too long, and it's going to change. And if they want to preserve their sport, they're going to have to speak up. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. You kind of hit on something about predators there, and I have a guy right next to me that did a lot of work for coyotes, against coyotes, I guess, and pretty much he has a mindset that's probably, I don't want to speak for him too much here, but he definitely likes to shoot coyotes when he can and kind of get rid of some of them on the landscape. They're pretty efficient at what they do as far as hunting and feeding themselves. How do you feel about that? I know there was a presentation about the whole coyote issue there at the QDMA event.
Yeah, that was Will Goldsby from Auburn. He's actually one of my former PhD students, who's now a professor over at Auburn, and doing some good work over there as well. And we've had, for the last 20 years here or better in the Southeast, we've had some research directed towards what impact are these animals have, and trying to understand a little bit more about the biology of this eastern coyote. And we're finding some really fascinating stuff. You're in Texas, you always have had coyotes, as long as you've lived there, I'm sure, and up and down the Midwest, and you deal with that on a landscape scale. But what we're finding is this critter, this dog that we got over here, is a little bit different than the western coyote. Its behavior is different, how it uses the landscape's different, and it's a little bit bigger. Its food habits are different. You know, this coyote is an extremely adaptable, what we call a mesocarnivore. It had to be a very adaptable. And it has adapted to all the different habitats all the way up and down the East Coast, or the eastern United States, and has done very well. And the white-tailed deer has been, you know, has felt the brunt of that in many places, particularly as it relates to fawn recruitment. You know, when you have coyotes out there, and when you got fawns dropping on the ground, and coyotes at that time of year, there's not a lot of other, you know, any other types of soft mass and stuff like that for them to eat, and you know, and you're trying to feed pups. It's hard to beat one of those tender little protein packets laying out in the woods. You know?
Yeah, sure enough.
And we're finding in some areas that they are taking a very significant portion of the fawns that are born. Mm-hmm. You know, we've got very productive deer herds in many areas of the eastern United States, and in some areas they can tolerate this predation rates. Particularly up north, they seem that the predation rate the mortality rate related to coyote predation on fawns tends to be less than it is down here in the southeast. And we've seen upwards in some of our studies that I've seen across the southeast that have been published, you know, 50 to 60% or more of the fawns that are the 50 or 60% mortality of fawns, and most of that due to coyote predation.
Man, that's kind of crazy, you know. And like you said, we dealt with them here for a long time, and it seems like there's a little bit of conflicting information that comes out from time to time. But I do know that around here I can definitely see what I think is impact, you know, in my own eyes of doing my best to do some predator control, especially before fawns drop, because we actually had a situation, I guess it's 2 years ago, caught a coyote on trail camera running video mode with a fawn's head in its mouth while it was swimming in a creek. It was kind of a crazy little thing of footage. But and then today, actually, we went out and checked trail cameras, and in the middle of the night, had a panicked doe run in on the camera with her mouth open panting, you know, and I can only imagine there's just a few things that would make her do that in the middle of the night. And it's got to be, I would imagine that, you know, predation has something to do with it, you know, and it's just kind of crazy the impact that they can have. And
you know, what we're finding is in some areas it's not just fawn predation, and that they are taking some adults. Mm-hmm. They're taking it up north in the wintertime when, you know, it's a little easier for a coyote to move when they got a crust on the snow. They can take some adults. But even here in the southeast, we're finding some areas where we're starting to see that, you know, coyotes are taking some adult deer. Now, whether those adult deer are predisposed because of an injury or disease or something like that, that's hard to say. But you know, it's not just fawns that they're feeding on.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I had a 3.5-year-old buck last July that was killed out in my pasture not far from my house. I saw it the following morning, and he was obviously run by a pack of coyotes into the corner of the fence. And by that morning, most of him was gone. So it wasn't one coyote running him either.
Man, that's nuts. That is crazy. Well, we didn't even get on the phone to talk to you about all the deer issues that we're facing, but some high quality information. And so let's talk about, you know, one of the things that the deer actually use. You know, one of their top tools to actually avoid predation, you know, avoid hunter pressure, of course. We want to talk to you about deer vision and how it works and some of the ins and outs on it. So, first off, you know, to kind of correlate it to the predator thing, how do the deer's natural predators like coyotes, like their I guess their natural camouflage, how does that work against a white-tailed deer?
Well, let me put it this way first, you know, and I think this is something most hunters don't realize. They're, you know, with the scent industry and all the other types of things that you have out there for scent-free clothing, mm-hmm. Everybody thinks that the main sense that white-tailed deer uses to avoid predation is its sense of smell. Well, that's not the case at all, mm-hmm. because the sense of smell is totally ineffective if the predator is downwind, right?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. So the sense of smell can help the deer as far as predator detection, but its number one defense against predation is its eyes. Mm-hmm. And what we have found out with the deer's eyes is that when the deer is looking at the same landscape you're looking at, they're seeing something very, very different. and their eye is finally tuned for the detection of movement.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have real good acuity. They have color vision stuff, but they are just absolutely incredible at their ability to detect movement, and we've kind of figured out the mechanism how that works.
Wow, that's interesting, and that was actually part of one of my questions was, should I be worrying more about the coloration of what I wear in the woods, or should I be worrying more about, being still at all times? And I guess you kind of answered that. So,
well, I think what we ought to do is if you've got time, what I think would be informative is kind of take you through the progression of the research that we've done for the last 20 years and bring you up to speed exactly where we are and what we think we know about deer vision and what we might not know. So we started with some deer vision trials, doing some vision work 20-some years ago. We got together with at that time there was a number of studies that tried to, figure out whether deer could see color or not, and they used things like colored buckets and, feed buckets to see if they could tell the difference. But those kind of things are, they're wrought with interpretational errors, because you got differences in hue and differences in shade and stuff. So we decided we were going to go inside the deer's eye to find out what they have the physiological capability of seeing. We got together with some guys, vision experts at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and they came out and brought a lot of their analytical equipment out here to Georgia. They're the smart ones. They brought their analytical equipment out here to Georgia, and we actually tested 5 deer. And actually, what our goal was to get inside the deer's eye and look at what's on the cones inside on the deer's retina. And I understand that you remember your high school biology, right? Where vision is made up of rods and cones. Rods are what we use to see in low light conditions, and you can only see black and white because they only have what's called one photopigment on it. Now, cones is what we use to see in color, and we see 3 colors because we have 3 different photopigments on our cones. One that peaks in red, one, blue, green, and red is where their peak central spectra sensitivity. That's hard to say this morning. Anyways, but any other color we see is a combination of the reaction of those 3 colors. So we wanted to get in and see if deer had more than one photoreceptor on their cones, and if they did, that means that they would have at least the physiological capability of seeing color. And look, long story short, we found out that they did not have 3, but they did have 2 photopigments. One that was very similar to our blues, and one that was somewhere between our reds and our greens, somewhere in the yellow range, which means the deer have the capability of seeing what we call dichromatic, which would be fairly similar, at least as far as the color vision, to what a human that's red-green colorblind would see. They see the blues very well, but they have a hard time distinguishing between reds and greens. Okay, so that's where we were 20-some years ago. Since then, we've done a lot more work on this. And some of the next steps we took is trying to get in and look at some of the actual physiology or the anatomy of the eye on top of it. So I had another PhD student, Gino D'Angelo, who's now a Dr. D'Angelo, actually on our faculty here at Georgia as one of the deer research biologists. And he did a number of studies looking at the deer's eye. And what we wanted to do is go into the deer's eye and map out these cones on the retina. And what really turns out to be very fascinating is the blue cones, or the blue photopigments, are distributed all around the retina. But the longer wavelengths are in a long band that runs horizontal along the deer's retina. I think it's really, really fascinating when you think about it. When a deer's looking and its eyes are, if you ever look into a deer's eye of a living deer, their pupil is not round. It's oval shaped, which means it's more of a horizontal slit.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So think about the implications of that. Where would danger come for a deer? Somewhere along the horizon, right? It's not going to come from below or above. So a deer has the ability to scan the horizon because it's got, instead of a circular pupil, it's got a slit pupil. That then is translated onto the retina, so that the things that are in focus on the retina are all across that band. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Is because when a human is looking at something, and think about when you're looking at something, we're always looking at an individual point in space.
Uh-huh.
Our eyes are constantly moving. When we're reading, when we're looking at something, and we're looking at far vision, near vision, we have a great ability to accommodate. So our vision is really, really acute. compared to a deer's. And we look at an individual spot in space and we recognize what that is because we can build a three-dimensional structure of it very easy. Deer can't do that as well. Because a deer's eyes, if you ever look at a deer's eyes when it's just standing there, they're like a horse. They're not moving. So instead of moving their eyes, what they see when they're looking at the horizon, everything that they see is in equal focus, but it's not in the same focus as it would be in a human. What that does is it takes away some of their visual acuity. We just finished up a study that says, deer's ability to see something and identify what a stationary object is probably in the neighborhood of what we would equate to as a 20/60 or 20/80. In other words, deer would almost have to wear corrective lenses to drive. I know what you're thinking. I know deer got great eyes, right? I was sitting in my stand, I moved just a little bit and it saw me.
Yeah.
Well, that's the difference. Deer get their visual acuity out of movement, not out of identifying a stationary object. How many times have you had a deer walk right up to you and look at you and then keep walking? Mm-hmm. That happens all the time, right? Why didn't that deer see you? Or you're standing out in a field and you're looking at the other end of the field and you say, hey, there's a deer out there. And what's that deer doing? Hey, what's that? Mm-hmm. And move their head side to side, trying to get around, get a picture of what you are. But as soon as you move, they recognize you, right? Mm-hmm. But that's what happens with a deer. Their eyes are stationary, but when an object in the environment moves, it moves that image on their retina across that band in the back of their eye. That's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So everything a deer sees from the front of it to about 300 degrees, they've got a tremendous peripheral vision. And their peripheral vision, how ours gets cloudier and cloudier as we move out a little bit from our focal point, theirs is equal focus. So if a deer can see you, you're just as in focus as if he's looking straight at you.
Wow.
Which tells you, but it's still kind of shady. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they get that idea of movement because from that retinal streak, which is also important to think. You've seen deer run through the woods, at high speed, and we can't do that. Why can't we do that? Because when we run through the woods, our eyes are trying to focus on every stick, every branch, every root, every tree, and stuff like that, so we don't run into those things. Instead, with the deer, that's just a panorama or a movie playing it out across the retina, and they see it all.
That's cool.
And they don't have to track it. So that is just fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
No
that is.
So that's one aspect of it. As far as think of the importance of that to the hunter. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily the camo you're wearing or the camo pattern you're wearing. It's going to bust you on a deer. It's whether or not you're moving. Mm-hmm. The best camouflage you can be is stationary. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter whether you're wearing pink or yellow or camo pattern or the best camo pattern out there. Not moving is more important than what you're actually wearing as far as camo. Mm-hmm. So now let's go one more step beyond that. When we did those vision studies years ago, we got into the deer's eye and thought, identify what we thought they could see based on physiology. But, there's other things that can interfere with that as well. So the next step we did was actually get the deer to tell us what they were actually seeing. In other words, to confirm what we thought they could see based on what we saw in their eye, to having them look at it in some behavioral trials. I had this really bright student I was working on his master's at the time, and he wanted to do some of this work and to train deer to respond to colors. So he built what was called a deer training apparatus, which actually it uses different lights and sensors that is a computer-driven way to run these deer these trials over and over and over again to get an idea of what they could possibly see. And we train deer to respond to a light so they get a food reward. Simple like you've heard of Pavlov's dog. This is the same type of thing. Mm-hmm. And we worked with Everready Energizer. They developed some LED lights that had very specific spectral signatures for us. They were very gracious to work with us on that. And to make a long story short, what he found is after running thousands of these trials, his deer see both dichromatically like we expected them to. But what we didn't expect was, compared to the human, their ability to see blues, because in that original study, we couldn't tell how the quality of their vision in that part of the spectrum, we could only tell that they could see it. But compared to the human, their ability to see blues is probably 20 times ours.
Whoa.
So when they're looking at something's blue, that is extremely bright to them, extremely vivid to them, because they have that ability. Now, think about the implications of that in a number of ways. First of all, if you're a deer hunter and you refuse to wear blaze orange, but you wear blue jeans to the deer stand, you're an idiot, right? Because you got two glowing blue legs up in the sky, right? Mm-hmm. Particularly at sunrise and sunset. Because at nighttime, and then you're right at that crepuscular time, when deer move, there's a lot of ambient blue light out there. And that's why they utilize this. That's why it's focused for them. Mm-hmm. So deer use that blue light. They can see, and if you've ever been out in a deer stand and look at your legs, or if you're wearing blue jeans in the evening, do that. Look at your legs sometime and see how vivid that is. Think about then that a deer can see that 20 times as well.
Yeah.
So, that blue is very critical for them. Now, you think about, here we got a deer called a white-tailed deer. Why does it have a white tail? Why isn't it a red tail? Because they see blues very well. And what is being reflected off a white tail?
Blue.
All the colors of the spectrum that are available right there, by the light that's reflecting on the projected on the tail. So that tail is actually reflecting a lot of blues as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, does that mean if I have like white fletchings in the stand, they're actually showing up blue to the deer and they're showing up real bad? What those white reflectors, those things that are showing up, is all the colors in the spectrum that are available that are reflecting on it. Because white is just a combination of all colors, right? Sure.
That's what we see as white. So here's the thing to think about: when you have a lot of camo on, that has a lot of whites in that pattern, that white can be quite vivid to them. Particularly if they've got what are called whiteners and brighteners in the fabric or in your wash. Mm-hmm. What those whiteners and brighteners do is they take UV light, and we know the deer can see into the UV a little further than we can, but that doesn't mean that we glow because of that. What that means is when you use whiteners and brighteners, it takes some part of that spectrum into the UV and re-reflects it back in the part of the spectrum we can see into the blues. So whiteners and brighteners really accentuate the blues on top of that. So camo patterns that have a lot of white in, and particularly if that white has dyes in there that are whiteners and brighteners, or if you use whiteners and brighteners in your wash, that becomes more vivid to a deer as well. Mm-hmm. So I generally stick with just the old time, kind of the Army camo with the big blotches on it, into the reds and the browns and stuff like that. It aren't focused on the part of the spectrum where the deer's eye is best.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of marketing involved with those UVs, like you see people talking about UV blockers or that sort of thing with like different sprays or detergents or whatever. Like, is there some truth to that and using those UV blockers?
There is some truth to it, and it's not that I keep coming back to this idea. It's not like a human glows like it's under a black light.
Mm-hmm.
It's because deer can see into the UV. It's because they see blue so well that's what these UV blockers do, is they block that interaction of that dye or that whitener and brightener. That's re-reflecting some of those lights back in the part of the spectrum where it's really, the peak of the deer sensitivity.
Mm-hmm. So
using, first of all, don't use whiteners or brighteners in your detergent when you're washing your hunting clothes first.
Yeah, sure.
But a UV blocker, that's conceptually, now I've never been inside a deer's head to know what it's actually seeing, but it conceptually it makes sense that might be something to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you guys got time to hear just some more?
Sure.
Oh, of course.
Okay. So let me take you where we have just gone in the last couple of years. We're up to a couple of years ago, and I've just finished up another student she did some really neat work using the same deer training apparatus that we use in the vision trials to actually find some other aspects of the deer's vision that's different than ours. And one of the things we looked at is what's called the temporal resolution. In other words, it's how fast deer can process visual images. So let me explain how this works. You probably have seen these things, little demonstrations where you see this white light flashing on a screen or something, and it flashes faster and faster and faster and faster until it almost looks like it's a solid white ball. Mm-hmm. You don't see the flash anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's because it's overwhelmed our ability at some point to process that information that your eye is just saying it's constantly white right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing when you see a fan or rims on your truck or something like that take on these patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we wanted to see how fast deer could do this visually. And it turns out, using a bunch of different trials again, their processing speed, particularly in the daytime, is about 4 times faster than ours.
4 times faster?
4 times faster.
Golly.
Which would suggest that they could see movement, because everything appears a little bit more in slow motion to them. They can see movement that much better because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it also helps them run through the woods. You know, when they're fleeing, they see all that stuff, and they can process those images faster than we can.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So again, it comes back to this whole idea of movement.
So when you shoot at a deer with an arrow, and say you grunt stop it, it's looking at you. I mean, we all know that deer, if you're a bow hunter, you know that deer can jump a string, as we call it. Is that sometimes, do you think that could be due to vision as opposed to the sound?
You know, I didn't think about that and until just a few months ago. And I was talking to another biologist, and he was talking about, having a deer jump an arrow on him. I got to thinking about it. You know, an arrow is not going at the speed of sound, but it's not that far under the speed of sound.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about it, it really can't be the sound that they're jumping. Because by the time they hear that sound and process that sound, that arrow's already there.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So what makes me think is they might actually be seeing not hearing it. They actually may be seeing either the arrow or the bow as the bow goes through that, that release and the vibrations and your movements and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
As far as, at the release, the bow's always going to tip, the string's changing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they might see the process of the shot.
Right.
And maybe even be able to see that arrow in flight, because they're tracking 5 times or 4 times as fast as we are. Right? That's
interesting.
But I think the biggest thing is probably the movement from the stand, not the sound.
Yeah.
So on that note, does that mean that, what's the average lifespan for a deer? Like if they're lucky to make it to 8 or 9 years. But if they're perceiving,
in some places it's 1.5 years, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, before antler restrictions, that was 1.5 years for sure in our county.
That's true.
So if they're perceiving things 4 times as fast as us, does that mean that 1 year to a deer is perceived like as we would perceive 4 years? Does that make sense? That gets into some, let's play some kind of head games. And people that talk about this as far as visual processing among the different species, they suggest that time flows slower for animals that have higher processing speed.
Wow.
And then there's animals out there that have slower processing speed, like a turtle does, than we do, and the time moves much slower for them. So how they perceive time, that's almost metaphysical,
Right.
Yeah.
Beyond our capability to understand.
We're kind of getting into the theory of relativity there.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy. So I have a question for you. If deer can perceive motion that well, while say for instance, if I'm jogging down the road, I'm moving, but the world around me is moving in my perception. You know what I mean? Like everything's going by in a blur. So if we have to move in the stand, whether it's, to draw our bow or to readjust or whatever, is it advantageous to wait to when a deer is moving, or do we really need to wait till there's a visual obstruction or something like that?
Well, I think you answered your own question right there. First, a visual obstruction would be obviously the best thing. If their eye is behind a tree, they can't see you.
Yeah. Well, say we're in a CRP field. How about that?
But I would suggest that the best time to move would be while the deer is moving. That would just make sense, that it would camouflage your movements more because it's mixed in with their their observation of other things in their environments that's moving. But still, even in that panorama, they'll be able to pick out something that's moving within those movements. It's going to be moving at different rates. The best thing is if the deer is looking directly away from you, there's about a 50 or 60 degrees angle behind the deer's head that they have a blind spot. Compared to us, which is, we can see about 120 or 140 degrees. They can see like almost 310 degrees.
Yeah, that's a lot. But 50 or 60 still sounds pretty good. Like, that gives you a little room to work there. It's just, you'd rather not have to have the deer walking away from you before you get a shot off.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. So let me ask you about a deer's ability to perceive different senses at the same time. I know, like, I have friends who run like rabbit dogs or coon dogs, and their dogs almost shut off parts of their body, like some senses, to focus on their nose. Is there ever a time when a deer is more concentrated, like on its hearing or its smell, and they aren't perceiving as much visual sense?
That's one of those things, and until we can get inside a deer's head and figure out exactly what they're sensing, that'd be impossible to determine. But I do have a couple of observations, kind of that they're related to that. And that I ran coon dogs for years and years and years, and I've noticed, and we're just going to deal with the sense of smell, not with the vision. But I've noticed when he's just running and just not really paying attention, he can run over a coon track or something and never even put his nose to the ground until he actually starts working. So once he gets that smell, he starts focusing on that sense and focusing on that track. They can perceive it much better than if they're, and you think we do the same thing until you notice something and apply your interest to it. You may miss it, but once you see it, then you can see it in detail.
Yeah.
So,
Tyler?
Yeah. So, if I've had instances where a lot of times, and I think I've heard this from different hunters as well, but right at dark, it's kind of hard to get deer to go away so you can get out of your stand sometimes. It seems like there's a heightened sense of relaxation or just calm that time of day, even though, from the research that you're telling us, it seems like that they can see really well still during that low light time. Is that, what's the reasoning there for them to be, like, it seems like if they'd have come in 30 minutes earlier, they would see every movement that you make but when it's right at dark, they, just almost don't pay attention to anything you do. You have to throw a water bottle out of the stand at them to get them to go away sometimes, That
was an extremely tough question. I am not a deer, but just to throw out some speculation, is their visual acuity actually declines. So, even as it gets dimmer and dimmer in the evening as well, it has to, just like ours does, because you're relying primarily on the cone vision, and then it's going to transition into rod vision when it gets really, at real dark. So, that's one aspect of it, and it might be related to vision, but I think some of it is related to the animal's feeling of security.
Okay.
And and deer learn when to worry about a predator like a human, and they adjust their behaviors accordingly. And deer know that humans are really only dangerous until dark. And
right.
At least in most places, some places in rural Georgia that might be different.
Yeah,
right?
Same here. No doubt.
But that their perception of that danger is only when hunters are in the field, in the stands. So I think it might have to do a little bit with their learned behavior of when danger occurs.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. We got a big study going on right now down in South Florida, just in the Panther range. And we've got a bunch of deer with GPS collars on that. We collared over 300 deer with GPS collars down there. And we're looking at one of the aspects was looking at their behavior as related to the behavior of the panther. And the panther down there is almost completely nocturnal. Well, the deer responded to become almost diurnal, that they don't move much at night. They move all day long, though. And you think about associate in South Florida moving all day long. You're moving during the heat of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem real adaptive, but it's very adaptive when you realize your main source of mortality moves at night.
Right. Huh. That's interesting. So, I mean, I guess obviously moonlight is going to affect, in most situations where you don't have maybe a large predator like that, it's going to affect deer movement at night. Can you kind of go into detail a little more on how deer see, how their vision works at night?
Yeah, and that's a tough one. Obviously, there is some color out there reflected from the sun reflecting off the moon. So there is, I would expect them to have a little bit of color vision at that time, whereas we see primarily black and white. Remember, deer have a tapetum at the back of their retina that reflects that light back over their rods and cones a second time. That's what causes the deer's eye shine.
Mm-hmm.
But that doubles their perception of light at nighttime. It doubles their ability to see at night. Plus, they have a much wider opening of the pupil. They can open up their pupil much wider than we can. They got much bigger eyes than we do.
Mm-hmm.
And the wider opening in the pupil allows more light in there. Anybody that deals with objective lenses on scopes and binoculars, knows that as you increase the diameter of the objective lens, the light gathering ability increases by the square of that diameter. So if they can open their eyes 2 to 3 times as big as we can open ours, just because of that, their light gathering ability is 4 to 9 times as ours there. Doubling that with the tapetum, so you already have a tremendous, increase in ability to see at nighttime. And it's hard for us to perceive, their ability at night.
Right.
Now, but there's a big difference when you have a moonlit night versus no moon, right? A new moon.
Mm-hmm.
So, that the amount of light out there on a moonlit night, they can see very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
And you've noticed that deer do seem to move. You see them out in the fields a lot more on a moonlit night than on a dark night.
Mm-hmm.
And, so, they feel more comfortable because they can see better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So to apply that to the hunter, what color of a headlamp would be more advantageous for a hunter to use, going in early in the morning or exiting late at night?
Well, that's a kind of a tough one, and I think there's an awful lot of marketing associated with this. Because you see deer standing on the side of the road with their headlights going by with they're on vehicles. Or, they see lightning bugs at night, and they see lightning at night. There's flashes of light and stuff like that. I don't think you can camouflage a light, but I don't think it's that big of a worry to them whether they see a white light move, because they do not realize there's a hunter behind that white light.
Mm-hmm.
Until they, unless they hear the sound of it, it's associated with it and pick up that cadence,
right?
Or pick up some odor from it. But if you wanted to minimize their ability to see any light, something into the reds, which is, the dark reds, which we see better than deer. Deer don't see as far into the red part of the spectrum as we do.
Mm-hmm.
So how when we see reds and it starts getting darker and darker and darker red, it turns to black.
Mm-hmm.
That happens further down the spectrum to deer.
So
something that we would see as a dark red, they would probably perceive as a black.
Well.
But even red lights, red headlights and stuff like that are going to bleed a little bit of white light.
Yeah,
sure.
Unless you've got a perfect lens.
Yeah. I'm not colorblind, but my red headlamp, I can't hardly see. It feels like it is the dullest lamp that I have, so I have trouble seeing that. I'm sure the deer are seeing it as black if I can't hardly see it.
And that's probably true. If it's that dark for you, they're not going to perceive it that much.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So while we're on colors, if you were going to, say, design your own camouflage, where would you start? Or if that's confidential or something,
actually, we're working on some of that.
Very cool. More to be told later.
And I think it's possible to make a camo that takes away a little bit of the deer's ability to see that movement, which is important, and to work within the color, the color spectrum that a deer can see. We can work to the deer's eye. The problem is for that stuff to be accepted by the hunter, and it would probably end up looking very weird to a hunter. The education it would take to get a hunter to wear something that looks really stupid is a wood.
Yes.
Well, I know Tyler and I both wear Sitka, and at first you look at it and you're like, man, I don't know. But then, we've been in the stand, killed deer with it. It works. Or like some of the ASAT camo, it has the really big, like squiggly blotches through it and stuff. It just doesn't look anything like the trees you're in, right? But it works. So I guess there's something to it. It's just like you said,
and I know Sitka based their camo based off some of the work that we did with the guys from University of California, and they're a company that actually uses science to develop their camos.
Yeah.
So I applaud them on that.
That's cool. But so you said earlier that like deer see probably in something in the range of like a 20/60 according to our vision. So there's got to be a distance where like camo doesn't really even matter anymore, right? Like 70 or 80 yards, something like that. It's just a blotch.
And here's where I keep coming back, and I think that's I kind of commented on this earlier in the discussion, is that the camo pattern might be less important than the movement.
Sure.
And the biggest thing you can do with a camo pattern is break up the outline. I think obviously that's important. But if you can develop a camo that can actually help you match movement, that would be the critical thing, not to mask the colors. So, and distance obviously would come into play. It even comes into play with humans. You can see somebody in camo, as you get closer, they become much more visible.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we talked about how they see well into the blue spectrum, that white reflects blue, obviously, along with other colors. So when in the Sitka that I wear, there's a lot of white and blue. And it makes sense to me because when a deer's looking up at me in a tree stand, they're seeing white and blue behind me in most situations, especially, November on. And so does that make sense in theory that should we be wearing stuff that's more white and light blue? And then also from a like access standpoint, should we be wearing something darker to walk in so that we're not this white and blue thing walking in along horizon level?
And I think you've hit on some things that a blue stick isn't even thinking about as well. But there's this idea that if you're in a tree against a blue background, which during the daytime or what we perceive as a black, but deer will still see a lot of colors in there right at evening as well. And having that same type of reflectance in your camo is probably appropriate. Much more appropriate than having just a big black blob, against a white background, because that would accentuate movement. So it makes sense to have something that would break up a pattern, a skylight pattern, or if you're hunting in snow conditions, same thing. Having that white in there that's going to be camoed against the white of the snow, or basically what the deer would probably see more as the blues, would be more appropriate than having a big blob moving across the landscape. Again, what you're doing in there is camouflaging the movement, not necessarily the color. But having something, if you're on the ground, it might be a little bit more appropriate to have something much darker. It doesn't reflect that, because the sky doesn't occur on the ground, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what about, you talked earlier a little bit about the fluorescent orange stuff, and I get that. I understand how they don't have the right things in their eye to perceive that as a bright color like what we do. But I've always been hung up on the idea that, like, it's still got to look like a big blotch of something solid, right? So
yes, exactly. Okay, here's two aspects of it to think about. First of all, if it is a solid of color, if you're wearing a solid blaze orange, that is one solid color. And it doesn't matter what color it is; it's still one solid color that would be moving in the landscape. So having a breakup pattern on your camo or on your blaze orange would be appropriate to try to break up that color. The color is not as important. Deer don't see that as vividly as we do. And there's a lot of oranges out there at that time of year as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried about the color of the blaze orange. I'm worried more about the size or that this is one color. And then one other aspect of the blaze orange, there's a lot of blaze orange out there that's built into fabrics. And then you also see blaze orange that are kind of like the vinyl vests.
Mm-hmm.
And these, anything that has a white, so you're getting actually two reflectance off of something like vinyl. You get a white flash reflectance off of that gives it that shine, which includes all the colors of the spectrum, and most of them. And then you get the actual color reflectance from the blaze orange.
Mm-hmm.
So you're actually getting a lot bigger broad span view of a number of different colors with that white flash. And you've seen where, it doesn't matter what color it is, but if you've got something plastic out there, you get a white flash from it, it's in the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So the same thing with the deer. So my suggestion is don't wear something that's a vinyl pattern or something, even maybe even nylon that's going to have that kind of sheen to it. To have it as a dull, soft color into a cotton or a wool or something like that.
Yeah. So matte cloth is way better no matter what. Yeah.
Certainly.
Totally makes sense.
Cool.
That's awesome, Dr. Miller. And you've supplied us with so many things that are almost just mind blowing, and it's cool to have guys like you who have dedicated their lives to studying deer and then sharing that information with us. And we really, really appreciate that as deer hunters and just, I guess you'd call us amateur biologists as well. So in your opinion, what is the one mistake that hunters make that gets them picked off by deer vision more often than anything else?
They sound a little facetious, but I think the biggest mistake hunters make, period, is relying on technology instead of hunting prowess and ability.
Ooh, that's a good one.
So, and that's, we hunters are as bad as bass fishermen, and my wife's a horse person. It's just as bad. Anything on the market that thinks it will make you better, they're willing to buy, right?
Yeah.
So if it works, I might as well try that too. The thing is to learn the animal and hunt the animal. That's one aspect. So, but get back to your question. I think the movement aspect of it.
Yeah.
I think the moving in your stand. If a deer is far away, if a deer can't see you, it's far enough away they can't see you. It doesn't matter how much you move in your stand. But, that movement right when, and you've all been busting in a deer stand, making that movement, trying to adjust to a draw or something like that. And, watching and understanding that deer's behavior and its visual capabilities so that you can, move in your stand to make the draw and actually when to draw and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of deer lost because people think that the deer's not seeing it when it can't see them.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, well, I can guarantee you one thing. I won't be having anything blue on me this year, and I will watch my movement because Tyler's kind of been critical of how much I move in the stand sometimes, which I probably do move too much. But I also am often hanging my stands at 35 feet up in the air because of that. So maybe I can move them down a little bit lower. But Dr. Miller,
if you got one more second, that's actually a very important point that you just made.
Okay.
Being above the vision of the deer, because they got that slit pupil and because they got that streak in their retina, they don't see above and below near as well as they see at the horizon.
Mm-hmm.
So,
is there a degree there?
I don't know that you could actually put a degree to it. The further a deer is away, the smaller that angle will be. But if the deer's right under you, you can move all you want. If the deer's standing directly underneath you, they'll never see you.
Mm-hmm.
So the blind spot is actually much more up and down than it is left or right.
Exactly.
Huh.
Cool.
Very cool. That's good to know. So there is some valor to my high tree stands.
There you go, man.
I love it. Well, Dr. Miller, thank you so much for being with us today and then dealing with some of our technical issues that we've had. But it's been good to get to talk to you, and can't wait till the next time we get to meet up and shake hands.
All right. That's fun, guys.
All right. Thank you.
See ya. Man, it's just hard to beat somebody who knows that much about whitetails. Something to be learned in every sentence,
Yeah, I know it, man. It's sometimes I think that I know a little bit of stuff, and then I talk to someone who actually knows things, and I'm like, okay, just sit down, KC.
Yeah,
My goodness, man, I'm overloaded at the moment.
Yeah. It's cool stuff, man. It's, it's cool to think to do tactics and that kind of thing and like hunting and everything. But I feel like when you do the biological side of things and you understand that you might be able to like pick up your own tactics through experience. And after that, after you learn that knowledge and it stick with you a little better, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's very valuable to learn stuff like that.
And it's also kind of like going along with just being a all-around outdoorsman thing. Do you really care about the animal, or do you really like have a passion for this if all you do is like just try to kill them? Right. I truly like to know about deer vision because I think it's cool. Mm-hmm. It's so neat to me that like there's animals out there that perceive the world differently than we do. And we can't even wrap our minds around how they see things. Yeah,
no, that's exactly right. It's like one of those things that you can only imagine. That's it. You know, it's crazy. But we do have a couple of videos because we do like to hunt them too. We have some videos where we're doing some scouting this summer that have released since we last talked to you guys. One is a PLC, Public Land Chronicle. If you follow us, then you've seen those on our YouTube channel. And make sure, if you haven't, then go to our YouTube channel and subscribe because you'll see more of these throughout the year. But pretty much anytime we have anything interesting happen for us on public land, we do a little short video of it. And we found a pretty studly couple of bucks on a piece of public recently. And I think the title of that video is like Mature Bucks in the Middle. And so it's a PLC. It's on our playlist for 2018 PLC or Public Land Chronicles. So check that out if you're interested in seeing what we've been up to on public. If you're interested in seeing what we've been up to on private in our new venture there, we have released a video of the spot that I'm hunting, me doing a few different things and starting to develop a plan on this property. And I believe the latest video of that is called Patterning a Big Buck or Patterning a Mature Buck, something like that. Anyway, it's on our permissions playlist. So if you go to our YouTube channel and look up the permissions playlist, there's two videos. They're both of the Walmart property, which is the one I'm hunting. And KC, we'd got a video coming up soon. It won't be up by the time you listen to this, more than likely. But he's got one that a new property that is pretty awesome. And so we're going to be chronicling that as well. And we've already done one video. We just got to get it edited up and put out to the world. So hopefully you guys can check in on that. What else they need to be checking in on, KC?
Y'all need to be following us on social media, especially this upcoming week, because we are traveling to Bozeman, Montana. So I hear that that's like a sportsman's paradise. I haven't been, but everybody I know that like really, really likes to pursue animals and the outdoors ends up moving to Bozeman, I think. Yep. So that's going to be a pretty sweet trip for us. We're going up there for the TRCP Media Summit like we did last year in Minneapolis, which was a great time. But we're going to go up there a couple days early and most definitely do some trout fishing. It's going to be hopper season. We are going to possibly get some pictures of some big bucks in some agricultural fields. So that would be cool. And probably be visiting some of our friends up there. We might even stop by Sitka and see what's going on. So it should be a pretty sweet trip. And y'all be sure and follow us on social media, especially our Instagram story, because that's where we put a lot of our day-to-day stuff, and see what we got going on up there.
Yeah, for sure, man. I'm excited about it. And I appreciate you guys listening. Remember, this is your element.
Living it.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24th, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.